Chapter 241. Kingsley looked at the emergency room. For as long as he knew Benjamin, he had never seen Benjamin in such serious condition apart from that one time when the latter had an accident during the field operation. Other than that, Benjamin had always been healthy, and he didn't even catch a cold. But now he's having an anaphylactic shock. Don't worry, Sean's an amazing doctor. He can save anyone even if the patient's life is hanging by a thread, Kingsley said to comfort Orissa and himself at the same time. Orissa looked at him and nodded. She wasn't as nervous as earlier after Kingsley and Sean came. This is all my fault. If I didn't prepare a natto feast for him, he wouldn't be in this situation. You made the dish? Kingsley asked in surprise. Orissa nodded in response to his question. At this point, she was filled with regret. If he dies because of this, I'd never forgive myself. How do I even bring myself to look at the kid's eyes in the future if something happens to him? Her eyes started tearing up. Kingsley raised his brow when he saw her cry. She's really worried about him. Benjamin would be extremely pleased if he knew how worried Orissa was. Don't think too much. Let's wait for him together. Don't worry. He won't be so easily defeated by a mere allergy, Kingsley said casually. She turned to look in the direction of the emergency room. All she wanted right now was to see Benjamin coming out from the emergency room safely. Kingsley sighed and leaned against the wall with his hands in his pockets. He was looking at the emergency room too. I wonder how Benjamin's doing right now. He should be fine, right? Kingsley turned to look at Orissa again. He recalled their first encounter. Back then, she was really calm and composed. However, this was the first time he had seen her this nervous and worried. Without thinking, he took his phone out of his pocket and took a picture of her without her knowing. After that, he kept his phone as if nothing happened. The bodyguards were at a loss for words. Kingsley stared at them and they avoided his gaze. An hour later, Benjamin was finally out of the emergency room. He was still lying on the hospital bed with an IV drip. Although he was safe from critical condition, he still hadn't regained consciousness, and the swelling on his face hadn't gone away. Orissa hastily went up to ask the doctor. Doctor, how is he? Kingsley was shocked to see how Benjamin looked. Is he okay? He asked Sean immediately. He's fine now, Sean said and let out a sigh of relief. He was completely surprised by what Benjamin looked like when he walked into the emergency room earlier. Benjamin had eaten too much natto. If Orissa hadn't brought him to the hospital on time, he might not make it. Don't worry, we've cleaned out everything that was in his stomach. He should be fine after getting his injections for the next few days. Make sure that he doesn't eat any food that is exceptionally rich in proteins, especially natto and mollusks, the head doctor said to Orissa. Orissa nodded quickly and said, Okay, doctor. I'll remember that. Thank you so much. Let's transfer him to the ward now so that he can rest, the director said to a nurse, and the nurse pushed the hospital bed to the ward. Orissa quickly followed behind them. How come I never knew that he's allergic to that stuff? Kingsley asked Sean. Now you do. Sean looked at him briefly before making his way to the ward as well. Is he really okay now? Kingsley asked as he chased after Sean. Sean rolled his eyes at Kingsley. Yeah, he's fine now. Didn't you hear us earlier? Is he doubting our skills as doctors or does he have doubts about Benjamin's ability to recover? But, I was almost scared to death when I saw him on the hospital bed earlier. He looked like he was about to die. Why did he suddenly eat that anyway? Doesn't he always follow a strict diet? He's the same as Gavin in terms of their weakness toward food allergies, Sean said. He had never seen Benjamin in that condition before, so he was completely shocked by the big, red patches on his body. I know why he ate that, Kingsley said mysteriously. You do? Sean asked with his eyes open wide. Kingsley ran his fingers through his hair as he walked and said, Beg me and I'll tell you. Sean was speechless. This guy has been with me all along. How would he know that? There's a big possibility that Orissa told him. Chapter 242. After the director and the rest of the medical team helped Benjamin to settle down in the VIP ward and gave some instructions to Orissa, they left. Orissa sighed when she saw Benjamin's swollen face as he remained unconscious on the hospital bed. She took the ointment prescribed by the doctor and applied it to his face. Kingsley and Sean came in at that moment. "This guy's will be disfigured," Kingsley teased. Orissa lifted her head to look at him. That's not true. He'll look fine after the swelling goes down." Kingsley laughed. "Damn, I thought I can scare her. She's quite smart. How childish." Sean shot a look at Kingsley before he turned to look at Orissa. "So you're Gavin's mom," Sean said. "No wonder Benjamin treats her differently." Orissa nodded and introduced herself. "I'm Orissa York." "I know, I'm Sean Bailey," he replied with a smile. He thought about the time when he almost got to meet Orissa in person. Orissa nodded and continued to apply the ointment. When will the swelling go down?" "The swelling should reduce after we give him a few shots, a few more bags of drips, and apply the ointment that you're holding," Sean explained to her so that she wouldn't be so worried anymore. Orissa looked at Benjamin and considered taking off his clothes so that she could apply the ointment on his body. The red patches on his body were more serious than the ones he had on his face and neck. Sean suggested with a smile after sensing her hesitation. "If you want the swelling to go away sooner, it's best to apply it everywhere. Besides, it'll soothe his discomfort since it has some cooling effect as well." "Okay," she replied. "He's like this because of me. Applying the ointment on his body is nothing compared to that." Once she made up her mind, she started unbuttoning Benjamin's shirt. The two men stood at the side as they watched her without offering their help. It was only when Sean nudged Kingsley that the two of them left the ward to give Orissa some privacy. "Does this count as a blessing in disguise for Benjamin?" Kingsley teased as he rubbed his chin and had a look of mischief on his face. Sean laughed. "Maybe. Since he's okay now, let's go play with Gavin and the others," Kingsley suggested. "Since Orissa is here to take care of him, there's no need for us to be here anyway. It's better for us to return to Old Manor of the Graham family to play with the kids." "Wait a moment," Sean said before he walked into the ward. Sean walked in on them as Orissa was about to take off Benjamin's belt. When she saw Sean, she quickly retracted her hand. That was so awkward. "We'll be going first, Miss York. Please take good care of him. Feel free to call me anytime if there's anything. He'll be fine after taking the shots, so don't worry too much, okay? Please continue with what you were doing. The swelling would go away faster if you apply the ointment every 3 to 4 hours, Sean said to her and left his name card on the table. After Sean left, she looked at the closed door and waited for a while. When she was sure that no one would come in, she started taking off Benjamin's shirt. The sight of all the red patches on his entire body was terrifying. She didn't even have the time to check out his body. Instead, she quickly applied the ointment on the front part of his body. Once she was done, she did the same thing to his back. Just as she was applying the ointment on his waist, someone gripped her wrist suddenly. "Ouch!" she exclaimed as she felt that her bones almost cracked. She lifted her head and her heart tightened when she saw Benjamin glaring at her. He had regained consciousness. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked with furrowed brow when he saw that it was her. "I'm applying ointment. On you," she replied. His glare shocked her. His eyes flashed. The moment he saw his naked body, he raised his brow and stared at her. "Could you please let go of my hand?" Orissa blushed and tried to suppress the pain in her wrist. "That hurts. Do you know that your grip is very strong?" Benjamin let her go after realizing that he was still gripping her hand. Once her hand was free, she quickly massaged her wrist. There was a red ring around it. Chapter 243. "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" he asked in a deep voice as he frowned. "I did," she exclaimed and glared at him. "Who would have heard it when your voice is so soft?" He snorted. She was speechless. "You're the one who hurt me, yet you're defending yourself. Lie down properly." "I'm not done yet," she said as she tapped his thighs. The moment she did that, his gaze turned dark. She squeezed some ointments on her fingertips and started applying his back. He felt the coolness of the ointment as soon as she applied it. Other than the cooling sensation of the ointment, he felt a little numbing sensation. Something flickered in his eyes as his breathing became labored. Orissa felt that the atmosphere was getting a little steamy, so she sped up. She didn't think much about it when Benjamin was still unconscious, but when he looked at her as she applied the ointment on his body, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Her face blushed. "Are you helping me to scratch the areas that itch?" he asked while staring at her with narrowed eyes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she grinned. "Just a little bit more," she said, and quickly applied the patches on his thighs before she put the ointment away. Right after she had done that, she reached for the blanket and covered him up with it. "Ah, that's better. I can look at him more normally now. Do you want to drink some water?" she asked to break the silence. "Why is he staring at me like that? What is he looking at?" Orissa quickly adjusted the head of the hospital bed and placed a pillow on his back. Once she was done with that, she turned to pour a glass of water for him. Benjamin was a little dumbfounded by her obedience. Is she behaving like this out of guilt for what happened to me? When she put the glass to his mouth, he took a few quick gulps. "Slow down," she exclaimed. She was afraid that he would choke. "Shall I get a straw for you?" she asked. Benjamin lifted his head and glared at her again. Her heart skipped a beat in response. "Are you treating me like a child?" "What? No, it's easier to drink with a straw in this condition," she denied while shaking her head immediately. In fact, that was how she took care of her kids when they were sick. However, she would never tell him that. Benjamin glanced briefly at her before he took the glass from her and drank on his own. When Orissa saw how the lump on his throat moved up and down as he drank from the glass, she couldn't help feeling attracted by that movement. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, the swelling on his face and neck seems to have reduced. Do you want some more?" "No," he said and passed the empty glass to her, which she took from him almost immediately and put it aside. "Would you like to lie down?" "No, this is fine," he said and reached for his phone. Benjamin only remembered that he wasn't wearing anything when he touched his bare thigh. "Pass me my phone." "Okay," she replied and went to get his pants and dug around for his phone in his pocket. Once she got it, she quickly passed it to him. When she remembered that she hadn't updated Ethan about Benjamin's condition, she quickly took her phone out to type a text message. She texted him, "Mr. Frank, Mr. Graham is awake now. He has gotten a little better, so don't worry." "Who are you texting?" Benjamin asked as he glanced at her. "Mr. Frank. He's worried sick about you," she replied and continued to check her phone for any messages that she hadn't responded to. Benjamin frowned. "What about you? Aren't you worried about me?" "I am," she blurted out and blushed immediately. "I wasn't only worried about you. I was scared to death when your body started burning up and fainted." Benjamin felt a lot better when she told him that she was worried about him, but his heart sank when he heard the second part. "Ah, that's embarrassing. Don't you know that you're allergic to food like natto? Why did you eat so much anyway?" she nagged. "I've never eaten it before, so I wouldn't know," Benjamin replied arrogantly. Orissa had no way to counter that. "I'm sorry, I didn't know that you can't eat that," she apologized. His lips curled slightly when he saw how sincerely she was apologizing. His mood became better right away. "Are you guilty?" Chapter 244. Orissa nodded fervently. "It wasn't only guilt. I hope I never did that. I'm glad you didn't die, or else I'd definitely regret it for the rest of my life. I don't know how I should face the kids if something were to happen to you. They finally have a dad now, and they'll never forgive me if I were the one who caused his death. So you only feel bad for the kids?" Benjamin's mouth twitched and his voice came out like ice. Orissa peeked at him and saw how angry he looked. "I don't know how I should face you too. It's my fault this time and I'm really sorry. I'll treat you well, and I promise not to play any tricks on you in the future." "Ha!" he exclaimed and stared at her meaningfully. "So, you finally admit it." Orissa felt a chill running down her spine. "How do you plan to treat me well?" he teased. Orissa beamed. "I'll do anything you tell me to. I won't turn down your requests anymore." "Oh," he responded with his voice raised on purpose. "Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere?" she asked when she saw how much better he looked. "Some parts still itch," he said. She was taken aback by his response. "Where? Don't scratch it, or else it'll become inflamed if the skin's broken." "Did you miss a spot?" Benjamin asked with a glint in his eyes. I don't think so. I'm sure I applied it everywhere, she replied with a puzzled expression. Benjamin knitted his brows. Where? I'll help you, she said immediately when she realized his discomfort. His eyes sparkled with an exquisite gleam, and he lowered his head a little to look at his lower body. When Arissa noticed that, she helped him to take the blanket away. Her face blushed red when she saw his long legs. When her gaze reached his underwear, she quickly looked somewhere else. Where? She asked again despite feeling embarrassed. He fixated his gaze on her. What do you think? Her eyes opened wide, and she stared at him in disbelief. Does he mean that area? When she remembered that she had just suggested to help him scratch the places that itched earlier, the awkwardness in her grew that she couldn't even speak clearly anymore. Can you apply the ointment on that area by yourself? She asked. Benjamin had the urge to pinch her blushing, red cheeks when he saw how embarrassed she was. Who was the one that said she'll do anything I asked without rejecting? Benjamin taunted. Arissa didn't know what to say. Well, I did say that, but he wants me to help him with that area. Is he sure? She stared at him, and he remained indifferent as if he didn't say anything weird. He's serious, isn't he? Can't you do it by yourself? I don't have the strength to do it, he said indifferently. He had no intention of applying the lotion himself. Who was he trying to fool when he had such a strong grip on my wrist earlier? Arissa cursed in her heart. However, when she looked at his swollen face, she was overwhelmed by guilt once more. He shifted in the bed with a pained expression. Arissa noticed that, reached out to check his temperature with her hand. He's still feverish. Don't touch me as you please. He glared at her. Arissa pursed her lips. I'm just checking to see if your fever's gone. Lie down properly. I'll do it. I'll do it, she thought after seeing how pitiful he looked from the discomfort. Benjamin cast a glance at Arissa and lay on his back. Arissa took the ointment, twisted it open, and squeezed some out on her fingers. After that, she started applying it on Benjamin as she turned her face to look somewhere else. Where do you think you're touching? He huffed as he tensed up. He felt a wave of heat radiate through his entire body from the inside of his thighs that was touched by Arissa. Oh, Arissa was completely flustered. She blinked as she identified the exact position of his organ while making sure that she wouldn't see it clearly. Then, she aimed for it, pulled his underwear, and started applying the ointment while squeezing her eyes tightly. Benjamin, you pervert, scumbag, bastard, she kept cursing him in her mind. She applied it on his part as fast as she could and dashed to the restroom to wash her hands. You pervert. She continued to wash her hands with soap one time after another. Chapter 245. Arissa, Benjamin called out, and she shuddered. What is it? She asked while glaring at him as she walked out of the restroom. Thank God he covered himself up with the blanket. I don't know how much my heart can take if he didn't. Help me with my clothes. Why do you need to put your clothes on? She asked puzzledly. I want to go to the restroom, he replied while looking at her. Since she can't say no to that, she obeyed. She helped him sit upright, took his clothes which were lying around at the side, and helped him to put them on. She made sure to avoid the area attached to the drip when she helped him with the task. Later, she started to button up his shirt. Although he had his shirt on, his strong and firm chest could still be seen. That was a sexy scene. If it wasn't for the red patches on his body, everyone who set their eyes at him would be bewitched by the scene. Fortunately, the smell of the ointment suppressed her thoughts from running wild, and she continued to button his clothes. Benjamin stood in front of her and gazed down upon her because of their height difference. He noticed her facial features, and his gaze flickered when he breathed in her milky fragrance. When Arissa was buttoning the last button which was closest to his neck, Benjamin asked, Are you trying to strangle me? Is it too tight? I'll unbutton it then, she suggested after taking a look at him. She undid the top button. She's really obedient today. Undo one more button, he huffed softly. After she undid 2 buttons, his attractive collarbones were exposed. Is it better? Yeah, hurry up, he replied. The next moment, Orissa took his pants, but he continued to sit there without moving. Lift your legs, she urged when she saw that he wasn't cooperating. Benjamin looked at her for a while before lifting his legs one by one. After some time, she thought of another way to help him wear his pants. Later, she bent down and helped him wear his pants. When she was almost done, she gestured for him to stand so that she could pull his pants up and zip his pants for him. Benjamin snorted softly, which startled her. Could you be gentler when you do that? He said through clenched teeth. My organ might lose its function if you pulled my pants up too tight. I didn't do it on purpose, she exclaimed. Her entire face became red, and she didn't even help him button his pants and put on his belt. No one could stand the sexiness that was radiating from his body. She averted her gaze, held onto the drip with one hand, and held onto him with another. Not long after, they reached the restroom. Be careful, she said. He looked at her, saw some sweat on her nose, and walked into the restroom without commenting on anything else. Meanwhile, Orissa waited outside as she held onto the drip. She couldn't bring herself to walk into the restroom with him. Come in. The tube of the drip isn't long enough, Benjamin said as he popped his head out. She gritted her teeth and went into the restroom. As she was entering, she kept looking for a place to hang the drip. Wait, just as she said that, she heard the sound of water splashing. She turned in the direction of the sound and saw him standing in front of the toilet seat. Flustered, she quickly turned in another direction. Her face turned red all the way to her neck. Oh my God, what have I seen? In her heart, she saluted all the healthcare workers in the world. They have to go through this every day. To them, this must be nothing, right? However, she wasn't a healthcare worker, so obviously she couldn't stay calm the same way they did. At the same time, she clenched her fists once more. Can't he just wait a little longer? Benjamin quickly put on his pants and washed his hands. When he noticed her red face, his lips curled up in a smile again. You've never seen a man in the restroom before. What about you? Have ever you seen a woman doing her business in the restroom? She countered. Who would go and look at men while they are doing their business in the restroom? What a crazy person. Has he been pretending the entire time? Who would ask such a thing out of the blue? She suspected that Benjamin was having a fever that made him lose his mind instead of having an allergic reaction. Where did the cold and arrogant Mr. Graham go? Good to know, Benjamin replied while raising his brow. He was happy with her response. Her mouth twitched. I've seen my boys pee before. Does that count? Benjamin was speechless. Chapter 246. Benjamin proceeded to give Orissa a thoughtful stare. How is it the same? How is it not? There's merely a size difference. Orissa rolled her eyes. Do you think I'm big, then? Hearing that, Orissa blushed. Is this man crazy? How can he say something so vulgar like that? That said, when their eyes met, Orissa realized she was the only one with naughty thoughts as Benjamin's gaze looked very serious. Benjamin was a little amused seeing Orissa's face turn red, but he remained calm. Let's get out. He spoke as though what he just said was nothing out of the ordinary, wiped his hands, and walked out. Orissa was not having that, so she glared at him before following suit with the drip in hand. After that, Benjamin sat at the side of the bed and watched as Orissa hung the drip back in place. She accidentally exposed her waist in the process when her shirt got pulled up, and Benjamin's gaze immediately darkened. She still has such a good figure after giving birth. That slender waist must feel real nice. Orissa felt Benjamin looking at her, so she turned to see what he was looking at before quickly pulling her shirt down. Then, she took out a thermometer and used it to check Benjamin's temperature. Your body temperature is still a little high, she said before placing the thermometer down and getting some water for him. You should drink more water. Benjamin took the glass from Orissa and handed it back after taking a sip. She took it from him, placed it down, and pressed the call bell. What are you doing? Benjamin knitted his brows while narrowing his gaze. I'm going to ask the doctor to come and examine you. With how concerned Orissa looked, the disapproval on Benjamin's face immediately toned down. Soon, the doctor appeared and did some checkup. His condition is getting better. All he needs now is more rest, he said. The doctor then adjusted the speed of the IV drip before leaving. After that, Benjamin used his phone to handle matters from work as he reclined on the bed. I'm hungry, he said all of a sudden. It was almost 5, and the lunch he ate was all cleaned out during the gastric lavage. So, it would be impossible for him not to be starving. Not even the strongest man could stand that. What do you want to eat? Orissa looked at him. She no longer dared to give him food randomly. You decide, he replied as their eyes met. Orissa nodded. If you need anything, use the call bell to call the nurse, okay? I'll get something for you to eat right away. Be quick. Benjamin knitted his brows. Okay. Orissa nodded and refilled Benjamin's glass with water before heading out. There were a lot of restaurants near the hospital, so Orissa picked the one that looked the most hygienic and ordered a chicken soup to go. However, before the soup was ready, Benjamin called her. Why is it taking so long? Orissa was stunned for a brief moment. It was fun for her to see Benjamin being so clingy. It's almost done. Just wait a little longer. Drink some more water if your hunger is getting to you. You can ask the bodyguard to go in and pour you some more if your glass is empty. I'll be back soon. Orissa comforted, but Benjamin unexpectedly said nothing and merely ended the call. Orissa was speechless while listening to the beeping sound of the phone. Is he mad? Excuse me, is the soup I ordered done? She asked the server. It's almost done, ma'am. We'll pack it up for you right away. The server replied and hurried to the kitchen. So, Orissa continued her wait. Meanwhile, while Benjamin waited for Orissa to come back, Ethan showed up. He was drenched in sweat as he came over in a hurry, breathing out a sigh of relief after seeing Benjamin awake. Are you okay, Mr. Graham? Ethan was scared to death when he heard that Benjamin fainted and was sent into the emergency room, but there were too many things to handle in the company, so he could not visit him any earlier. Thank goodness Mr. Graham is safe. I won't know what to say to old Mr. Graham otherwise. I won't die that easily. Benjamin shot Ethan a look. Ethan noticed that Benjamin was displeased, so he took a look around and cleared his throat. Where's Miss York? Didn't she say she would look after Mr. Graham? Is he angry because she left? Chapter 247. Why are you looking for her? Benjamin spoke in a deep voice, sounding a little possessive. Ethan had been by Benjamin's side for several years, so he naturally knew that Orissa was someone special to Benjamin. I'm just asking, sir. Ethan smiled. How did the negotiation go? Is everything settled? Benjamin snorted. Ethan immediately felt pressured. They wanted to raise the price by 15 cents. Which meant that an agreement had not been made. Benjamin's gaze darkened. If they're not satisfied with what we offered, let's look for someone who will. He only ever gave people one chance. Mr. Graham, but they're the best in the market. Ethan reminded Benjamin. Finding another company to collaborate with was not a problem for them. The problem was that other companies lacked quality control. Nevertheless, Benjamin shot Ethan a piercing gaze. One chance, and one chance only. Reject them. There was nothing Ethan could do but accept Benjamin's order. So, after he gave his report about work, Ethan went out and called the company to reject them. When the company found out that Benjamin was going to give up on collaborating with them, they panicked. Mr. Frank, is Mr. Graham really going to reject our company? Our product is the best in the market. We only asked to raise the price just a little bit, right? That's not a lot at all. Can't you help us talk to him? Mr. Graham gave you a chance. It doesn't mean that he accepted your offer even if he didn't personally attend the negotiation. From our standpoint, the price we offered was good enough for you to make a profit. But since we can't agree on the price, there's nothing more for us to discuss. Ethan was ready to end the call when he finished talking. Wait a minute, we'll take the original offer. Hearing that, Ethan raised an eyebrow. If only you were this decisive before this. Even if you accept, it doesn't mean Mr. Graham will agree, Ethan replied in a darker tone. If you're serious about working with us, I can help you check with Mr. Graham. Of course we're serious. Please help us out, Mr. Frank. All right, please wait a moment. Ethan went inside and reported it to Benjamin. Benjamin snorted in response. If they want to collaborate with us, lower the price by 15 cents. Ethan secretly smirked a little and, without saying anything, left to call the company again. What? Lower the price by 15 cents? They cried out in disbelief. If we go any lower, we'd be at our cost price. We won't be able to make a profit like that. Can Mr. Graham bump it up a little? Ethan felt humored. Mr. Larson, Mr. Graham initially offered you a price that would give you profit, but you guys didn't seize the opportunity and offended him. If you still want to collaborate with us, this is the only chance Mr. Graham is willing to give. Take your time to discuss it with your team and make a decision. Mr. Graham is not in a hurry. But remember, this is the only chance you get. On the other end of the phone, Emil was in anguish. That price is just too low. It'd be a miracle if we could even break even. That said, he figured that working with the Graham Group could still raise good publicity for his own company, so it was not all bad. Meanwhile, Ethan saw Arissa walking toward him with a bag in hand. Where did you go just now, Miss York? He greeted her with a smile. Oh, you're here, Mr. Frank. I went and bought some food for Mr. Graham. Oh, okay, go in quickly then. Mr. Graham's been waiting for you. So she went to buy food. No wonder Mr. Graham looked terrible. Does Mr. Graham have to see her at all times? Arissa nodded and went in the ward. Benjamin thought it was Ethan when the door opened, so he asked, how did it go? How did what go? Arissa looked at him, bemused. Benjamin paused for a second and looked toward her, pursing his lips. What did you buy? Why did it take so long? Arissa took a look at him and brought the bed table over. Then, she opened the thermos she had and served up a bowl of soup to Benjamin. I asked them to make chicken noodle soup, so it took some time. She proceeded to stir and blow on the soup before placing it on the table. Chapter 248. Eat up. Arissa paused. I almost forgot. She suddenly remembered that the kids were still at school and took out her phone to call Gavin. Benjamin knitted his brow after seeing that Arissa ignored him after putting down the soup to make a phone call instead. Who are you calling? I'm calling Gavin. The kids are still at school, so I want to go fetch them. Mr. Graham, Arissa answered after she turned her head. There's no need for that. I've already asked someone to go fetch them home. Benjamin's eyes glistened when he spoke. When was that? Arissa was astonished. Do you think you were the only one who remembered that? Benjamin sneered. Arissa pursed her lips. Do you have to be so angry? That said, she was at ease after knowing that the kids were home. Right then, Gavin picked up the phone. Mommy. Hearing her son's tiny voice, Arissa smiled. Hi, sweetheart. Tell me, are you guys home now or at school? Benjamin narrowed his eyes when he heard that. Is she doubting me? We're at home, Mommy. Gavin sounded a little unconfident, but Arissa did not notice. Oh, you're all at home. Then, if you guys are hungry, ask the butler to cook something and eat first. I'm not sure when I'll be going back, so eat your dinner earlier. Arissa told him. The little guy nodded his head at the other end of the line and replied, okay. I know, Mommy. Don't worry about us. We ate quite a bit not long ago. Great, Arissa exclaimed before saying goodbye and ending the call. She figured she should not take too long on the phone since Benjamin was staring right at her. Meanwhile, a sense of jealousy came welling up from Benjamin when he saw how endearing Arissa's smile was. Why aren't you eating, Mr. Graham? Arissa noticed that he did not even touch his food. How can I eat like this? Benjamin stared at her like she was the devil herself. Then, he lifted his left arm with the IV drip still attached to it to guilt Arissa. You have your other arm, right? Arissa was perplexed. I am not used to it. Benjamin complained. It was then that Arissa remembered that Benjamin was left-handed, so she asked softly, should I feed you instead? She looked at Benjamin while he pridefully puckered his lips. Seeing that he did not refuse, Arissa proceeded to sit down beside the bed, picked up the bowl, took a spoonful of soup, and blew on it before placing it at Benjamin's mouth. Be careful, it's hot, she warned. Benjamin cast a glance at Arissa and emptied the spoon. At that moment, Ethan came in. He was all excited and wanted to report that the company had accepted Benjamin's condition but was stunned to see Arissa feeding Benjamin. Oh, dear, Mr. Graham has actually asked Miss York to feed him. What is it? Benjamin shot a look at Ethan with his piercing gaze. They've accepted your condition, Mr. Graham, Ethan immediately reported. Okay. Benjamin did not show any reaction since he had already expected it. Ethan was very impressed. Mr. Graham is still the best when it comes to negotiation. He has them around his little finger. No one could ever take advantage of him. Then, he cast a glance at Orissa. Is there something else? Benjamin looked at him. In an instant, Ethan caught his drift and smiled. No, Mr. Graham. Rest well. I'll take my leave. Send the documents that need signing here, Benjamin ordered. Yes, Mr. Graham, Ethan said and left. He understood that Benjamin wanted to spend some alone time with Orissa. That said, Ethan only went back to the company after buying the daily essentials for Benjamin's stay and asked the bodyguards to send them to the room. In the meantime, Orissa continued to feed Benjamin while he stared at her obedient look. After eating some food, his mood seemed to be lifted. Did you only get soup? Of course. Your body is not well, so oily food is out of the question. Is the soup to your liking? Orissa fed Benjamin another spoonful. It's all right. Benjamin was particularly picky when it came to food, but since he was starving and there was no kitchen in this place, it was good enough. Chapter 249. Eat this for now. I'll make you something good tomorrow, Orissa promised. Benjamin snorted softly in response. Catching the insult in his voice, Orissa felt embarrassed. I promise I'll never do that again. My cooking skill is actually not bad, so just tell me what you like or want to eat. Are you sure? Benjamin showed subtle amusement in his eyes as he looked at the boastful woman. Of course. You've tried it, right? It wasn't bad, no. Orissa was very confident in her cooking skills as not only did the kids love it, but even Benjamin emptied his plate the few times he tried it. How are you going to cook when there's no kitchen here? Benjamin reminded. I can make it at home and bring it over once I'm done. Orissa answered while feeding him the soup. Who's going to take care of me if you go back? Benjamin's expression darkened. Orissa glimpsed the look on his face and quietly said, there are nurses in the hospital and your bodyguards are just outside. I can't feel at ease leaving the kids at home. There are people looking after them. Do you actually intend on leaving me, a patient, alone? How can nurses be the same? Benjamin was infuriated. Orissa was stunned by his reaction and looked at him. Benjamin turned away from her gaze as he felt uncomfortable, amusing Orissa in the process. If you want me to look after you, just say it. That anger is unwarranted. Now, eat up. Hearing that, Benjamin glared at her, annoyed. All right now, you should finish the soup before it turns cold. I'll stay, okay. Orissa patiently coaxed the difficult man. Do you think I'm some 3-year-old kid? Benjamin tried to be intimidating, but the swell on his face had not come down, so he looked a little cute. Nope, Orissa smiled. I didn't notice that. I've gotten used to talking with the kids. After hearing that, Benjamin went silent. And it took Orissa some more coaxing before he eventually opened his mouth to drink the soup. Next time don't buy this outside food for me. It's disgusting. Orissa sighed. How can I make food for you if you don't let me go back? You can go back and make it tomorrow morning. Did you forget that you have to take care of me? Would I be in this state if it weren't for you? Benjamin was infuriated. Okay, I know it's my fault. You are hospitalized because of me. Please give me a chance to redeem myself by taking care of you until you've fully recovered, Mr. Graham. Now, open your mouth wide. Orissa held the bowl and spoon in each hand in front of Benjamin as though she was feeding a child. Benjamin gave her a cold side eye but drank the soup nevertheless. No more. After 2 bowls of soup, Benjamin was a little stuffed. But there's still 1 bowl left, Orissa said and looked at him. I'm full, Benjamin exclaimed. Hence, Orissa rubbed her nose and sat on the side. If you're not going to finish it, I will. I'll bear with this temper of yours since you're in here because of me. With that, Benjamin resumed his work after seeing her enjoying the food. You've not recovered yet, so you should focus on resting. You can work when you've fully recovered, Orissa said after turning around, but Benjamin ignored her completely. After that, she finished the soup and went to take out the trash. When Orissa got back, Benjamin occupied her with task after task, and she did them all. She had been taking good care of her children, so one man was not much of a problem for her. She merely treated it as just a way to kill time. Eventually, the IV drip finished, so Orissa called the nurse in to pull out the needle. At the same time, Benjamin's temperature had gone down, and the swelling was gone, leaving only patches of red that could hardly mask the man's good looks. So, the nurse was ogling at him. For quite a while. Is there anything else? Benjamin asked with a narrowed gaze and darkened expression. Chapter 250. Benjamin retracted his arm from the nurse. It's all done, Mr. Graham. If you still feel uncomfortable somewhere, please let us know immediately. The nurse felt a little awkward, so she quickly cleaned up and left. Orissa took a look and noticed that the back of Benjamin's hand was bleeding, so she immediately picked up the cotton ball that fell on the bed and used it to apply pressure on the spot. Are you using something that has dropped to the bed to stop the bleeding? Benjamin gritted his teeth. Orissa felt speechless hearing that. It's just the bed and not even on the floor, no less. It's still dirty, Benjamin exclaimed. Hence, Orissa got a new cotton ball to apply pressure to stop the bleeding. This bed is so clean. How is it dirty? If it was, would you be covering yourself with the blanket? Want me to throw that away as well? Orissa said, not knowing that everything else was swapped out by Ethan, so none of it was the hospital's property. Orissa York, how bold of you to be talking to your boss like that, Benjamin scoffed. Nonetheless, Orissa kept her cool. She knew it was Benjamin's temper acting up since she would do the same if placed in his situation. So, after pressing on Benjamin's hand for a while, she carefully took the cotton ball away to take a look. When she saw there was still blood, she quickly held it back down. When Orissa raised her head, the first thing she saw was Benjamin focusing on the emails he received. Benjamin's facial features were exceptionally distinctive. With his deep-set eyes, sharp nose, and slightly pursed lips, every part of him exuded an air of royalty, demanding respect. At that moment, Orissa's heart started racing. Then, Benjamin suddenly turned his head and looked at her with a profound gaze. Are you enjoying the view? It's okay. Orissa felt embarrassed. Benjamin's face was still fairly red, so it made him look a little adorable. Go get the mirror. Benjamin shot Orissa a cold gaze. You look good. There's no need for that. Orissa smiled in response. Don't let me repeat myself, Benjamin warned. With that, Orissa puckered her lips and got the mirror for him. Benjamin took the mirror and saw that his face was bright red, like someone that was seriously drunk. Well, it's better than before. See, you're still very handsome, not ugly at all. Orissa quickly sang him some praises. Have you been secretly laughing at the way I looked before this? Benjamin narrowed his eyes and gave Orissa a peculiar stare. Orissa immediately shook her head and denied it. Of course not. I would never do that. Truth be told, she was extremely anxious. You better not be lying to me. Benjamin gave her another warning and tossed the mirror aside. Then, Orissa checked the time and told Benjamin that it was time to apply the medication. Benjamin shot a look at her before he proceeded to sit upright and opened his arms. Orissa was stunned for a second. Does he want a hug? What are you standing there for? Undress me, Benjamin ordered, snapping Orissa back into reality. As soon as he said that, Orissa felt embarrassed and awkward for thinking that Benjamin wanted a hug. After that, she got closer and started unbuttoning the man's shirt. At the same time, Benjamin caught a whiff of the scent from Orissa's body and gulped. His gaze on her tiny face had a hint of passion in it. Meanwhile, Orissa took off Benjamin's shirt, placed it aside, picked up the ointment, and started applying it to his body. The rashes on Benjamin's body were more serious than those on his face, as there were still lumps all over his body. When Orissa's cold finger touched Benjamin's skin, his breathing started speeding up. It was a little ticklish and numbing for him. Orissa raised her head to see that. Benjamin looked redder, so she knitted her brows. Are you feeling unwell? Just get on with it. Benjamin urged with gritted teeth in a low voice. Sure. So, Orissa got back to work and applied the ointment all over Benjamin's upper body. However, when she was about to loosen up Benjamin's pants, he pulled her hand away and proceeded to lie down with the blanket over him. That's enough. But we're only halfway done. Orissa looked at Benjamin with confusion in her eyes while he turned over and faced his back against her. Actually, Benjamin was panting. God damn it. She only touched me for just a bit. Where did all my self-control go?